Hello friends, I'm back with the most requested video related to my Accenture interview, wherein I'll be discussing all the questions along with their answers asked by the interviewer. The interview was conducted in the month of October 2021 for the experience 1 to 1.5 years in Salesforce, and there were in all 25 questions in this interview, which we'll be discussing one by one. So the first question was a very favorite question of interview, that is, introduce yourself. Second, do you know about security model of Salesforce? If yes, explain. Security model in Salesforce can be imagined as a reverse triangle with its tip at the bottom and the base at the top. The OWD, which has most restricted permissions, lies at the bottom, and restrictions goes on opening up starting from role hierarchy, sharing rules, to manual sharing. So here we'll go into the deep explanation. So organization-wide default is a baseline level of access that the most restricted users across the organization should have. OWD is used to restrict access. Access opens up more in the next upper level, that is role hierarchy. Role hierarchy is that where job roles are sorted in a hierarchical way. Users with a higher role have access to all those records to which users in lower roles have. Salesforce provides an easy way to share records with managers and represent a role hierarchy. Basically, role hierarchy maps the hierarchies of data access in an organization. So next, at the next level, there comes sharing rules, where access opens a bit more for users who do not own the record or they do not have access through OWD. If some specific group of users need access to perform some activity on object which are not owned by them, and also its OWD set to public read only or private, then this can be achieved through sharing rules. Sharing rules are applied by creating the automatic exceptions such as formula or condition on the objects. Manual sharing. Now, in some situations where we cannot share the records through sharing rules, there arises the need for manual sharing. Through manual sharing, one can share the record individually or manually with other users using the share button on that particular record. You can use manual sharing when it's not possible to define a consistent group of users when need access, and second, when it is not possible to share the record in any other way. So for example, if manager is on leave and wants to provide access to certain records owned by himself to his subordinates to handle the responsibility in his absence, then this can be done using manual sharing. Next question, give difference between workflow and process builder. So both workflow and process builder are used to automate business processes, but process builder is the upgraded version of workflow, which has released in 2014 with lightning experience. Now the difference, so workflow supports only 4 actions: create a task, send an email, alert, send an outbound message, and update a record. And process builder has more number of actions and than those existing workflow rules, excluding outbound messages. And next, in terms of workflow rule, single workflow rule is created for each criteria. For multiple criteria, we require multiple workflow rules, and for in case of process builder, we can have multiple rule criteria in a single process. So in case of workflow rule, although we can create more than one active workflow rules for the org, but then the order in which they will be executed cannot be predicted. Process builder lets you control the order of execution of the criteria. In workflow rule, we cannot have more than 50 active workflow rules in a developer org. In case of process builder, we can create any number of criteria using process builder. Cross-object reference field update is not possible. Cross-object reference field update is possible in case of process builder. Workflow rule version cannot be upgraded anymore, whereas process builder can be upgraded. Next question, if there are two users who are set to OWD equal to private and I want to grant permissions to them, how can I do that? So there are 4 ways by which we can achieve this: role hierarchy, sharing rules, manual sharing, and Apex manage to share. So starting from role hierarchy, if OWD is private but in role hierarchy that user is at the higher level, then he can get access automatically. Sharing rules will allow you to provide access to the records they don't own or are right protected by creating automatic exception to organization-wide sharing settings for particular set of users. If sharing rule doesn't work, then you can grant access to specific users through manual sharing, provided the OWD for such objects are set to public read only or private. Apex manage to share, so it's a last option to grant access to the users is writing an Apex class. That means by writing a code for inserting a share record through Apex class or trigger. But there is one condition to perform sharing through Apex class, that there should be modify all data permission enabled for that particular object. If this permission is not enabled, you won't be able to share the record. How many actions are there in process builder? What are they? So there are total 11 actions in process builder: create a record, update a record, send an email alert, submit a record for approval, invoke a process from another process, launch a flow, Apex method, post to chatter, quick actions, quip, and send custom notification. What is custom setting? Custom setting is a place where we keep the easily accessible and frequently used data. So let's take an example of a library. Imagine a library where there is a big shelf where many different types of books are kept, but only few of the books from that shelf are in demand and asked frequently by the users. So those books which are frequently required can be kept in a separate shelf near to librarian to make these books easy to access and provide. So this is called as custom setting. Custom settings are generally formed by keeping the frequently asked records in a cache. Next question, what should be the minimum code coverage of the test class before it gets deployed? So the answer is 75%. Can we deploy the test class whose total code coverage is 75% but its independent class code coverage is 10% or 20%? So no, we cannot deploy such a class. Next question, what are synchronous and asynchronous processes? Synchronous, entire Apex code is executed in one single go in one single thread. In asynchronous, task which waits for the resources to be available because they either need more computing resources or requires the resources for longer duration. So such tasks are actually called as synchronous tasks. If you want to create an asynchronous task, you need to create future method by just annotating the method by @future. What is the significance of future method? Future method provides the benefit of not blocking the users from performing another operation and also providing higher governor and executional limits for the process. Next question, have you implemented future method in your project? So I said no because I didn't implement that. What is the difference between future Apex and Queueable Apex? So it's a annotation based, so we can use the same Apex class to write the future method. Syntax is @future, and in Queueable Apex it is a class which implements Queueable interface, that is syntax is public class name implements Queueable. We cannot monitor the jobs in future Apex. In Queueable Apex we can monitor the jobs on the job ID. We cannot call a future from another futureable or batch apex. The limit on future method for single apex invocation is 50. We can chain the queueable jobs, and the stack depth in develop org is 5, and in enterprise edition you can claim 50 jobs. Future method supports only primitive data type, and Queueable supports both primitive and non-primitive data types. What is the syntax of a batch class? So here is the syntax of a batch class. We'll go to the next question. So the explanation for the syntax: start method is automatically called at the beginning of the apex job. This method will collect record or objects on which the operation should be performed. These records are divided into subtasks and passes those to execute method. Execute method performs operation which we want to perform on the records fetched from start method. Finish method executes all finish method is executed after all batches are processed. Use this method to send confirmation email notifications. So note, all three are required method. You cannot remove any one method as it is an interface. Next question: what if we do not write finish method inside a batch class? So class will not be executed, or the class will not be saved at all. It is mandatory method in a batch class. It will generate a compile time error while saving if we do not write finish method. Okay. Next question: how can we pre-populate the values using Aura? So answer is using init method. This event is automatically fired when an app or component is initialized prior to the rendering. Component code. So here is the code: Aura component, Aura handler, and do init method. If I want the data of one component in another component, how can I do that? So this can be achieved through application event or component event. So the interviewer told me to write a trigger, a simple trigger. Whenever an object case is created with origin equal to email, then its priority equal to low. So this is the code that I wrote that time. How many HTTP callouts we can make? So it was the 19th question, and so I said 100. Question 20: what are the governor limit errors you came across? When I tried more than 100 Soql queries in a single call, I received an error. You can run up to a total 100 Soql queries in a single call or context. So this was the error that I received. What is 201 error? This error is due to certain code breaking Salesforce governor limit for total number of Soql queries issued in Apex transaction, which means you can run up to a total 200 Soql queries in a single call or execution context. How do parent to child communication takes place in Aura? Step 1: define Aura ID of the child component in parent. Step 2: define Aura method in child component, and it will link to method to the child method of the child controller. Step 3: define lightning button on parent component, and on click of this button get the reference of the child component as mentioned in step 1. Step 4: call Aura method as mentioned in step 2. Question 23. Consider a case. I have written a future call in the accounts trigger update operation, and I have a batch job running on account records and where DML operation is performed on records. Will the future call be invoked after DML? No. Here trigger will throw an exception. Future method cannot be called from a future or batch method. Next question: how many future method can be defined in a class? Any number, no restriction on that. How to test future method? Call it within isStart test and isStop test. Here all asynchronous calls are collected by the system. After isStop test, all asynchronous calls runs synchronously. So here is the end of the interview. Thank you guys for your back-to-back request for this video. Your request in fact motivated me to prepare and upload this video. Thank you for all your love. Stay with me. Do like, comment and share my video. Bye. Thanks again.